All right, so I think I'm going to take my old avatar sprite and make it into the enemy that I'm going to deal with. So I'm going to create an object. This is going to be my enemy object for now, and he's going to take this sprite. Now something I've got to keep in mind is that I'm going to have to compare how high up on the sprite I've hit from when my monkey is hitting from above versus below. So what I'm actually going to be comparing is the Y position. This sprite here, the Y position is at the very bottom, and the same is true of the monkey standing still. So I'm going to be checking this Y position versus this one here. I'm actually going to have to figure out mathematically how far up I want it to be. So to begin with, let's have the enemy just stand still, because that'll make it easier to test, and then I'll have him move in a minute. When the avatar has a collision with the enemy, I need to figure out what's going on. So collision with the enemy. So there's two possible things that could happen. I could hit him from above, which will do damage and destroy him, and I can hit him from any other direction, and that'll cause me damage. So to begin with, let's actually have some lives, so I can actually see whether it's having an effect. So I'm just going to give myself 3 lives when this monkey's first created. Now, if you're switching back and forth between objects, you're going to want this to happen in a game start or a room start, because otherwise, when you switch back and forth, it fires this create event over and over again. So setting lives to 3, when I collide with the enemy, first thing I should check is, all right, my Y position, so that's the avatar's Y position. I want to see if that's smaller than some amount above the enemy's Y position. So it's going to be above. So this guy, I believe, is 32 tall. So what I'm going to say is if the value of other.y, that's the enemy's y, so I can actually refer to the enemy directly by saying other dot. That refers to that particular one. Maybe minus 20. So that's basically saying, all right, at the bottom of his sprite, because that's the bottom of the enemy sprite, minus 20, so that's 20 up on him. Maybe that's about where his eyes are. If my Y position, where my feet is smaller than that, that means I'm above him, and I should do damage to him. So I'm going to do destroy the other thing. Otherwise, I should subtract a life. And eventually I'm going to put things where I become invincible. But for now, I'm just going to say, your new lives are minus 1 relative. So I'll be able to tell. So that's going to happen when I collide. At the moment, I can't see whether or not I'm hitting the enemy. So for testing purposes, I'm going to go ahead and just draw the score in the top bar. Normally, you would probably want to put these two things in a controller so that if your monkey or whatever your avatar is gets destroyed, you're not going to get an error. All right, so let's see what happens. Oh, I should put an enemy in the room. That will make it easier to see if this works. All right. So there's my enemy. So I have 3 lives. I go run into him. I'm losing lives. And then when I jump above his head, he gets destroyed. Cool. Now there's one other thing I just noticed. At the moment, I'm checking to see if any objects are below me. That includes enemies. So gravity won't turn on if I'm going through an enemy. That's not acceptable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch this position with all objects. I'm only going to check to see if there's ground below me. This is in the end step where I'm checking for gravity. I'm going to check to see if there's ground at x and y plus 1. And only if there is not ground do I want to turn gravity on. That's what the special box not is that I want to see if there's not ground below me. So I'm actually going to delete the all things below me and only check to see if there's ground below me. That way if I have projectiles, enemies, all that kind of stuff, I don't want any of that to affect my gravity. Only if there's not ground below me. Okay. So just to be sure, looks like that works. Good. Now what about this invincibility thing? So I would like to make it that if I get hit, I don't want that continuous drain of life. I would rather have it that I become invincible for some amount of time, and then I go back to being normal. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create yet another variable. Well, let's go in invin, because I don't want to type that out many, many times. That's going to stand for being invincible. He starts off with invin being false. So that variable gets set up there. If I collide with the enemy, I need to check to see if I'm invincible or not. And that only really matters here when lives are relative to -1. Invin. If this is false, then I can lose a life, which is right here. I want to set invin to true. And finally, I want to set some alarm, which allows me to become normal again. So I'm going to give myself maybe 1 second of invincibility and leave it at that. When this alarm goes off, I want to set invin here back to false. Alarm 0. You are no longer invincible. Right, so I take a damage, I take damage, I take damage. Much better.